we never did anything with them. They were just, it's an odd thing to say, but it's the truth. They were very nice guys. I have the world by the tail, but sometimes it feels like it's choking me. A statement that might seem like a joke, but turned out to be Dean Martin's most bitter confession. Behind that half smile and carefree demeanor lies a multitude of hidden conflicts. He was once cut from the cover of a magazine. At the height of his career, had a bond with his closest brother broken, to the point where they couldn't even look at each other, and was even pulled into a political drama involving the president, causing chaos in the Rat Pack like never before. Many people only see Dean Martin under the stage lights, charming calm, always seeming like he's drunk. But few know that every star who crossed his path, from Jerry Lewis to Frank Sinatra, from Bob Hope to Bing Crosby, left behind a backstage story full of clashes, hurt, and silent battles. To understand why one of Hollywood's most captivating icons carried so many cracks within him, we need to look back at each relationship that lifted him to the top, and also those that pulled him into conflicts that lasted his entire life. 1. Jerry Lewis. The best friend turned into the greatest nightmare of Dean Martin's career. If I had known the price I would pay for this friendship, I probably would have left 10 years ago. That might be the line Dean Martin would have wanted to say whenever the memories of Jerry Lewis resurfaced. Memories of a relationship that was once the brightest light in his career, but also the darkest shadow that caused him the most pain. Their story didn't begin with hatred or rivalry, but with friendship, mutual support, and the belief that both would rise together to the top of Hollywood. However, when fame came too quickly, even the smallest cracks began to widen, transforming a beautiful friendship into a turbulent chapter in Dean Martin's life. In the early days, Dean and Jerry were the definition of perfect synergy. Dean was calm, sophisticated, with a warm voice that made the audience swoon. Jerry was youthful, energetic, always ready to dive into physical comedy to make people laugh. They were two contrasting pieces, but a perfect match, and it was this contrast that created an explosive effect. Every show they performed was a phenomenon, and every movie was a box office hit. The public adored them as a dynamic duo that couldn't be separated. However, this admiration unintentionally tilted toward one side. The media began to praise Jerry Lewis as the new star of American comedy. Major publications called Jerry a comedic genius, a laughter machine, the savior of Hollywood. Meanwhile, Dean, the older, more experienced one, was described as the straight man, the sidekick, the handsome guy standing next to the real talent. This wasn't done out of malice, but rather how the media operates. They always want to elevate one person. Unfortunately, that person wasn't Dean Martin. Dean didn't speak up, but deep down he felt his position was shrinking day by day. His silence wasn't weakness. It was out of pride. He didn't want to compete for the spotlight with someone he considered a brother. And so Dean's endurance lasted for a long time, until he realized he had almost lost control of his own career. Jerry was increasingly taking control over the decisions, content, performance style, set arrangements, even branding strategies. Dean had become a part of the duo, no longer a true half. The peak of his hurt came on a day that seemed quite ordinary. They both did a photo shoot for Look magazine, a promotional shoot for both of them, just like so many others. But when the magazine was released, Dean was left speechless. He had completely disappeared from the cover. The original photo taken together had been edited to cut Dean out, leaving only Jerry Lewis with a radiant smile. No explanation, no apology. No one seemed to think it mattered. For Dean, this was more than just a shock. It felt like a brutal declaration: you're no longer necessary. Each small wound added up to a larger injury, And after this blow, Dean knew he couldn't go on. During a performance, after the built-up tension, Dean turned to Jerry and coldly said one definitive line: "You can live without me, so go ahead and do it." Just one sentence, but enough to end a 10-year relationship. No fiery arguments, no drama beyond the stage, just the quiet shattering of a friendship that couldn't be mended. Their final performance together at Copacabana in 1956 took place in a suffocating atmosphere. The audience still laughed, cheered, and believed in the image of the happy duo. But behind the lights, Dean and Jerry didn't look at each other, didn't speak a word to one another. When the final scene of Hollywood or Bust was completed, they walked away from the set in opposite directions, and from that point on, they left each other's lives for 2 decades. The sad thing is that after their split, both of their careers continued to soar. Jerry became the king of comedy films, while Dean rose in his own way, joining the Rat Pack, becoming the king of cool and dominating American television. But sometimes success can't fill the emotional gaps. Jerry repeatedly admitted on TV that Dean was the best man I ever knew. As for Dean, though, he never said it. Close friends of his said he had been deeply saddened for a long time in the quiet, profound way of a man who doesn't speak much. 20 years passed. 20 years without a call, without a handshake, without a word of inquiry. Then, in 1976, Frank Sinatra decided to do something no one else dared. He brought Dean to Jerry's fundraising telethon. When Dean appeared unexpectedly, Jerry was stunned. The crowd erupted. The two embraced in a brief moment that conveyed more than words could say. It wasn't complete forgiveness, but it was a soft period on a turbulent chapter. Dean Martin may never have regained the friendship they once had, but he had found peace when looking back at the story. Ironically, as the pain with Jerry closed, life brought him another even deeper, more subtle, and more painful challenge. The person who stepped into this new chapter wasn't a stranger, but Dean's closest brother, Frank Sinatra. 2. Frank Sinatra, the brother who lifted Dean up, but also pushed him off the stage in silence. There are people who truly love you until you don't do things the way they want. Oh, yeah. He was so sick. He was, in that wreck. And nobody paid any attention to him. I used to carry him to the restaurant, and I loved him so much because he was... If Dean Martin had ever wanted to say that bitter line, it would likely have been about Frank Sinatra, his closest brother in the Rat Pack, and also the person who inadvertently pushed him into one of the most exhausting periods of his life. The conflict between them wasn't loud. It didn't explode in front of the public like with Jerry Lewis. It was quiet, subtle, but left a deep fracture that lasted until the end of his life. After the sudden death of Dean's son, Dino Jr. in 1987, Dean was almost completely shattered. He withdrew from the stage, living a quiet and sorrowful life, no longer the witty, carefree, and vibrant man the public once knew. And it was at that moment that Frank Sinatra appeared as a pillar of support. Frank couldn't bear to see his brother sink into sorrow, so he devised a plan to bring Dean back onto the stage. With good intentions, he proposed a nationwide tour called Together Again, believing that the applause of the audience and the warmth of performing would heal Dean's soul. But sometimes, even love can become a pressure. Sinatra was a perfectionist. He wanted everything to be precise, on time, disciplined, and explosive. Dean, on the other hand, performed based on emotion, improvising on the spot, and hated being forced. And during the most painful period of his life, Dean couldn't meet these exacting demands. For Sinatra, the only option was to pull Dean back no matter what, because he believed it was what was best for his friend. But for Dean, it felt like being forced to live a life he no longer had the strength to live.